Hey there Jedi Knights, Masters, and Younglings. Welcome to Which Lightsaber Form, the video series where we take the role of a Jedi Blade Master, evaluating characters from different franchises and figuring out which lightsaber form suits them best. Today we'll be examining the fighting style of Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender, the grim prince looking to restore his honor.
Keep in mind, these are dual swords, two halves of a single weapon. Don't think of them as separate, because they're not. They're just two different parts of the same whole.
Right off the bat, it's obvious that Zuko would be a practitioner of SHII-CHO. While the technique is not a distinct style like SHII-CHO or Xian or the other forms, it is an addition to any one of the classic forms. Quite literally, it means the art of dual blade fencing, and can be applied to the likes of Form 2, MAKASHI, like with a Sage Ventress, or Form 4, ATARU, like with a Sokka. Traditionally, the style was an extension of the sixth lightsaber form known as Niman, which was originally inspired by the Yoshin swordsmen of the Atrizian Empire. So, if Zuko was a Jedi, he would have been exposed to this form by way of his dual blade style. However, this does not necessarily mean he would have mastered it or honed the form itself.
For example, Anakin Skywalker, someone who favored Form 5, Jem So,
also dabbled with Niman, but, in his own words, only used it as an exercise in control. The key term here is control. For many of the Jedi, Niman was frowned upon as an impractical technique that only had academic applications within the confines of a temple or dojo, not on the battlefield. Of course, there are famed Force users like Exar Kun or the Starkiller clone that would disagree, but generally speaking, this was the agreed view of the sixth form by the Jedi Order. Within The Last Airbender, it's very likely that Zuko would have either been recommended the dual blades or he picked it up himself as a way to elevate his novice firebending skills at the time. The only reason we believe Zuko took an interest in swordsmanship was as an exercise in control, specifically control of his innate element, fire. And that proposition likely came from his master Piandao. Like with many masters, Piandao seems to adhere to a form of training that, on its surface, does not seem to suggest practical application. Like a Yoda or Mr. Miyagi, he instructs his students to develop skills outside pure swordsmanship. The interesting thing about Zuko is that the inverse likely happened. It was actually his training with the sword that was used to develop a separate skill, in this case, firebending. So the question becomes this. Did Zuko use this exercise purely in Piandao's dojo, or did he apply those principles in active combat? Beyond dual blade fencing, Niman also taught the use of the force in conjunction with the blade, which is something we've seen with Zuko's firebending and his broadswords. So attributing Zuko's style with Niman isn't far-fetched on face value, but what of the other styles? Our most prominent examples come by way of three duels featuring Zuko: his fight with the guards at Pohai Fortress, his bout with the Earth Kingdom criminals in the episode Zuko Alone, and his one-on-one duel with Jet in Ba Sing Se. When examining his group fight at the fortress, it seems the fight, and Zuko's style, is characterized by direct strikes and slashes accompanied by circular defenses and parries. When looking at his fight with the earthbending scumbags, his technique is marked by precision, with concise, quick moves, and more circular parries. And when reviewing his individual fight with Jet, his style is marked by environmental advantages through acrobatics coupled with distraction-based combat and misdirection with, yes, you guessed it, even more circular parries. So what does all this tell us? Despite Zuko's capabilities in group fights, it doesn't seem like SHII-CHO is actually in alignment with his style. The first form of lightsaber combat is a bit more broad and wide in its function, while Zuko's is more tight. And with his technique being so precise and measured, it would seem he has closer ties with Makashi, the fencer's form, which is the style he would attribute to Piandao, and Ataru, the acrobat's form,
which, defensively, is predicated on circular, more deflective parries, as opposed to Form 3, SORESU's more stalwart defenses. Something more akin to an earthbender.
Between Makashi and Ataru, Ataru seems to be the strongest correlation, or rather, Zuko's examples of deflective parries and environmental advantage match up best with the high-energy lightsaber style. However, unlike a Yoda or a Sokka, Zuko is not excessive in his use of the form, tapered by Makashi's more minimalist sensibilities. Or in other words, it never feels like Zuko is doing more than he needs to for each of his strikes. Well, except for when he broke Aang's chains in the Blue Spirit. And ultimately, these two styles culminate and funnel back into Neman, as Zuko uses these techniques alongside one another, with MAKASHI supplementing ATARU and the common denominator of dual blade fencing, rather than distinctly switching between the two, truly adhering to the moderation mantra within the sixth form. If his sword training was truly a way to elevate his firebending, then Neman makes the most sense. The more strength-based blunt version of Jim-So doesn't quite work for Zuko. And despite Zuko holding a lot of passion that can often be seen within his standard firebending, which is often attributed to Form 7, JUYONAAPAD, it doesn't seem like he ever used it while implementing his dual broadswords. It would seem his sword training actually quells and mitigates that unabated passion, which ultimately is what defines Zuko by the series' end.
And if we don't want the world to destroy itself, we need to replace it with an era of peace and kindness.
I would say Zuko's current style is a Neman specialist with a bit of ATARU as a basis, with MAKASHI sort of tapering it so that it's a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more direct, a little bit more precise than a more broader version of ATARU. As his hypothetical battle master, I would recommend for him to continue on his principles of Neman, honing in on that principle of moderation to maximize his efficiency in combat. The only real adjustment I would recommend to him is to lean a little bit more closely into MAKASHI, especially as he gets older in life, as we see Zuko later in Legend of Korra. In the world of Star Wars, I would recommend a master like Shakti, someone who coupled ATARU and MAKASHI together. I think that would be someone really well suited for Zuko in that world. If we're talking about Avatar world, I would suggest for him to continue training with Piandao, especially honing in again on MAKASHI and making sure that he is honing his lightsaber combat or saber combat in general craft. For me, Zuko is best when he is deliberate, focused, and controlled. So he definitely needs to hone into those principles to keep having success with his saber combat. As a final examination, I think Zuko will naturally continue following the principles of Neman in moderation and kind of using every skill set he can to help elevate his other abilities, in this case firebending. And as he gets older, I think he'll naturally move away from ATARU and start going further and further into MAKASHI, mostly because ATARU is so taxing on an older body. And as we see with Zuko later in Legend of Korra, he's definitely a much more nuanced fighter, naturally, because as we all know, Father Time is undefeated. And when that comes about, something like MAKASHI, which is a little bit more economical and minimalist and doesn't really drain your energy as fast, I think that's going to be something that he naturally is going to move into as he gets older and older. And also, just as he gains more wisdom, I think he's going to be a little bit more efficient in the way that he takes out his enemies, not using these broad strokes and doing more precise stabs and feints and things of that nature. Of course, this is all my opinion based on the lore of Avatar and Star Wars. Do you agree that Zuko would take on the principles of Neman attached with ATARU and MAKASHI, or do you think he has a different combination? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, peace, love, may the force be with you, and remember, be water, my friends.